What if the woman you humiliated in first class could dismantle your entire airline with one quiet move? Amara Ellis, 38, stepped onto a flight expecting respect but faced scorn instead. By dawn, she'd unravel a $4.2 billion empire. This isn't just a story, it's a revolution. Where are you watching from? Stay to see justice soar. The terminal at Dallas International Airport hummed with its usual pulse, the soft roll of luggage wheels, the steady drone of intercom announcements, the rustle of boarding passes in the hands of bleary-eyed travelers. Morning sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm glow across the gleaming marble floors. In this world of elite service, where looks often spoke louder than truth, Amara Ellis moved with the quiet confidence of someone who'd long learned to carry her worth like a shield. At 38, she wore a charcoal sweater, tailored jeans, and crisp white sneakers. Her hair was swept into a neat ponytail, and her eyes are behind sleek sunglasses. One hand gripped a simple leather duffel. The other scrolled through emails on her phone. She approached the priority check-in counter with the ease of someone who belonged exactly where she was. "Excuse me, ma'am," came a voice from behind a gleaming desk. The attendant, dressed in the crisp navy blazer of Horizon Airways, wore a name tag reading Clara. Her smile was tight, her gaze flickering between Amara's face and her casual outfit. Standard check-in is down the hall to the left. This line's for first-class passengers. Amara paused, her thumb hovering over her phone. "I'm in the right place," she said softly, her voice steady as she pulled up her digital boarding pass. First class, Horizon Elite. Clara blinked, her composure slipping for a split second. "Oh, of course. I'll just need your ID." Her tone climbed a notch, too eager, too late. Amara handed over her ID, her expression unreadable, watching as Clara fumbled to regain her poise. The check-in went smoothly after that, but the silence that followed spoke louder than any apology. No explanation, just a few awkward keystrokes and a clipped, "Enjoy your flight, Ms. Ellis." Amara took her boarding pass and headed toward the Horizon Lux Lounge. Her steps measured, her heart steady but heavy. She'd flown countless times, visited endless lounges. Yet this moment the way to being sized up before she could speak never got easier. Inside the lounge, soft jazz drifted through the air. Sleek leather chairs and modern art created an air of exclusivity. A tech executive tapped furiously at his laptop, sipping an oat milk latte. A retired couple murmured about their Napa Valley plans. Amara found a quiet seat by the window, where sunlight spilled in like a promise. She set her duffel down, pulled out her tablet, and opened a novel she'd been savoring. 5 minutes passed before a shadow fell across her. She looked up to see a man, white, mid-50s, gray blazer, wire-rimmed glasses. He leaned in, his voice low, as if offering a favor. "You might be in the wrong spot," he said. "This lounge is for premium members only." Amara didn't flinch. She reached into her sweater pocket and slid out her Horizon Diamond card. The man stared at it like it had bitten him. "Oh," he muttered. "Well, enjoy." He turned and shuffled off, no apology, just the sting of silence. Amara tucked the card away, turned a page on her tablet, and took a slow breath. Her phone buzzed boarding in 20 minutes. She typed back, "On time. I'll call before takeoff." Then she leaned back, her mind drifting, but never too far. Peace in these spaces, she'd learned, was always fleeting. Across the lounge, a woman glanced her way not with malice, but curiosity. She whispered to her companion, who turned to look. Amara offered a faint nod. Not every stare was cruel, but each carried layers she spent a lifetime unraveling. She thought of her mother, who used to say, "You don't need to shout when you walk with truth." That wisdom anchored her now, steadying her as a waiter delivered sparkling wine to a couple nearby. Though she'd been there longer, no one approached her. She pressed the service button on her armrest. A young waiter arrived, slightly out of breath. "Can I help you, miss?" "A sparkling water, please," Amara said. He nodded, returning quickly, but the difference in his tone, the assumption she was less lingered. She sipped her drink slowly, each bubble a reminder of the patience she'd honed, the restraint she'd mastered, the vigilance she'd never let slip. A voice announced pre-boarding. Amara glanced at her ticket. Gate C9, Group 1, First Class. She gathered her things, her calm unshaken. As she left the lounge, she passed the man who'd questioned her earlier. He didn't meet her eyes, laughing loudly with another passenger. She walked on, unbroken. At Gate C9, she joined the Group 1 line. The agent barely glanced at her pass before scanning it. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Ellis." No one challenged her now, but the subtle cuts to glances, the doubts had already landed, invisible to most, unforgettable to her. This wasn't about comfort anymore. It was a quiet battle of perception, and the war was just beginning. As Amara stepped onto the jet bridge, the low hum of the aircraft ahead greeted her like a distant storm. Her boarding pass, still warm from the scanner, felt like both armor and a challenge. She walked with deliberate grace, her duffel in one hand, her tablet tucked under her arm. Every step was measured not to impress, but because she'd learned grace under fire disarmed more than fury ever could. At the aircraft door, a tall flight attendant with practiced smile name tag, reading, Evan glanced at her, then at his screen. "Welcome aboard," he said, then eyed her bag. "Just to confirm, is that your personal item or carry-on?" His tone was neutral, but a flicker of hesitation betrayed him. "Personal item," Amar replied, her voice even. "It's within the limit." He nodded curtly and waved her through. As she moved down the aisle to first class, she felt at the shift of eyes, the trail of hushed silences. Her seat, 3A, was by the window, spacious and pristine. She stowed her bag overhead and settled in, adjusting the headrest with care. The leather was cool, the cabin too quiet, but this space was hers. Moments later, another passenger, a white man in his 40s, navy suit, polished loafers, entered her row. He paused, his gaze lingering on her before he spoke to Evan, who'd follow behind. "There's got to be a mix-up," he said, lowering his voice. "I'm in 3B, but this seat next to her, I prefer something else. Anything open across the aisle?" Evan glanced at Amara, then back. "Let me check, sir. We might have something toward the back of first class." The man added quickly, "It's just a space thing, nothing personal." Amara said nothing, her eyes fixed on her tablet, though she wasn't reading. She'd heard nothing personal before in boardrooms, at conferences, in cabs. It always came before something deeply personal. Evan returned. "We can move you to 4C, Mr. Harper. Less foot traffic." The man nodded, barely hiding his relief, and left. But instead of moving on, Evan turned to Amara, leaning in. "If you like a quieter spot, we have seats in premium economy." His smile was thin. Amara looked up slowly. "No," she said, her voice like steel wrapped in silk. "I chose this seat. I paid for it. I'm staying." Evan's smile tightened. "Of course. Just let me know if you change your mind." He left without waiting for a reply. The offer wasn't innocent. It never was. Soon, a young female attendant approached with a tray of welcome drink champagne, orange juice, sparkling water. She served a man 2 rows ahead, then the couple in 2C and 2D, before glancing at Amara's row and gliding past. Amara pressed the service button. The light pinged. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Finally, a different attendant, shorter, younger, less polished, approached. "Hi. Sorry for the delay," she said, her voice nervous. "Can I get you something?" "Sparkling water, please," Amara said evenly. The girl nodded and vanished. As the cabin filled, a subtle tension wove through the air, not loud, but sharp, carried in glances and gestures. A woman in designer sunglasses leaned toward her husband, murmuring something, her eyes flicking briefly to Amara. The man gave a low chuckle. Meanwhile, the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Horizon Flight 814, nonstop to Seattle. We're wrapping up boarding and expect an on-time departure." Overhead bins clicked shut, window shades tilted, and still, the seat beside Amara stayed empty. She didn't mind the space. What she minded was the silence around her, heavy with unspoken assumptions. When her sparkling water arrived, it came in a plastic cup, not the crystal glass everyone else received. She didn't comment. She didn't need to. She took a sip, her gaze drifting out the window, past the wing, to the gray skies stretching wide. In that moment, she wasn't thinking of lawsuits or headlines. She was thinking of how often people still believed she didn't belong. A quiet voice inside her whispered, "Stay steady. The storm's coming and you're at center." Minutes before pushback, another attendant approached with a clipboard. "Just confirming meal selections," she said. "You chose the chicken, right?" Amara shook her head. "I pre-ordered the vegetarian option 3 weeks ago." The woman blinked. "I don't see that here." Amara reached into her bag, pulling up the confirmation email. It was confirmed. The attendant glanced at the screen, then scribbled something. "We'll do our best," she muttered. "Please be patient." Amara gave a tight smile and set her phone down. This wasn't new. It was routine, polished, practiced, systemic. For some, first class meant luxury. For Amara, it often meant restraint. The aircraft door sealed with a thud. A chime signaled takeoff was near. But the real turbulence hadn't even begun. As the plane taxied, Amara felt a gentle lurch forward, the Engine's low growl vibrating beneath her. Her eyes stayed on the tarmac, but her mind was steps ahead, bracing for the next slight, the next glance that lingered too long, the next choice between speaking up or swallowing her pride. The safety video flickered on the armrest screens, but Mara knew these routines by heart. She closed her eyes briefly, inhaled deeply, then reached into her bag for her laptop, a sleek, matte black device etched with small logo, Solace Ventures. As it powered on, a soft chime hummed through her earbuds. She opened a draft proposal, her fingers skimming the first lines. But before she could settle in, a shadow crossed her tray table. "Excuse me," came a familiar voice, Evan, the attendant who'd suggested economy. His tone was light, but his eyes held a faint edge. "Quick question. Is that your laptop?" Amara looked up slowly. "Yes. Why?" Evan gestured vaguely toward the overhead bin. A passenger reported a missing item. "Same model. Just making sure nothing was taken by mistake." Amara's gaze didn't waver. "It came from my bag. You saw me bored with it." "Of course," he said, raising his hands. "No accusation, just checking. May I?" She turned the screen slightly, revealing her name in the corner of a Google Doc. A. Ellis, for $0.2 billion infrastructure proposal, Q3 draft. Evan read it a moment too long, then nodded. "Looks good. Thanks." He left without apology. Amara exhaled sharply, saved her file, and resumed typing. Around her, the cabin hummed with artificial calm soft jazz from overhead speakers, the clink of drink trays. But then, a sudden jolt shook her seat. She turned to see a young girl, maybe 7, staring wide-eyed, clutching a stuffed unicorn. She'd tripped, likely darting between rows, and bumped Amara's bag under the seat. The girl froze. Amara opened her mouth to ask if she was okay, but a woman blonde, in a pristine athleisure, sat swooped in like a gale. "What's going on here?" The woman snapped, her sunglasses perched atop her head, her eyes locked on Amara. "Did you trip my daughter?" Amara blinked. "No," she said calmly. "She ran into my bag. I didn't move." "Well, maybe watch your surroundings," the woman shot back. "This isn't your personal space." "Ma'am," Amara began, her voice measured. "Your daughter's fine. She ran between seats. I didn't do anything." "I saw what happened," the woman insisted, her voice rising. "Maybe if you weren't so busy on that laptop, acting like you run the world, you'd notice where your stuff is." Heads turned. Some passengers glanced at the woman, others at Amara, but no one spoke. Evan just rose away, busied himself with a beverage cart, clearly hearing but choosing not to act. The woman scoffed, grabbed her daughter's wrist, and muttered, "Come on, sweetie. Some people don't get first-class manners." The words hung like smoke. Amara's hands tightened under the tray table. She looked at her screen, but the words blurred. She wasn't angry at the outburst. She was angry at the silence that followed the way everyone saw, heard, and said nothing. That silence wasn't neutral. It was complicity. She picked up her phone and typed a quick message. "Boarded. Tensions rising." We'll update if it escalates. She paused and added, still breathing. She set the phone down, removed her earbuds, and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The girl's unicorn lay forgotten under her seat. Amara nudged it gently into the aisle with her foot. No one came for it. 15 minutes later, the flight hit cruising altitude. The seatbelt sign blinked off, and attendants moved briskly with meal carts. Amara reopened her laptop, but her focus was fractured. She scrolled through emails instead, pausing on one marked confidential, Apex deal. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. She'd written it, signed it, funded it. She closed the laptop, folded her arms, and looked out the window. Clouds drifted past, serene and distant. Below them were cities she'd helped rebuild, transit systems she financed, lives she touched. Yet here, in a seat she'd earned, she was treated like an intruder. It wasn't new. It wasn't even surprising. But today, something settled differently in her chest. They had no idea who they were crossing, and she was in the mood to teach them gently. As lunch service began, Amara's fingers tapped rhythmically on her closed laptop. The sting of everything the glances. The slights lingered sharper than any in-flight meal. A new attendant, tall and brunette, moved down the aisle with a tablet, confirming pre-orders. Her name tag read Lila. She reached Amara's row, glanced at her screen, and said, "You ordered the standard beef entree, right?" Amara met her eyes, her expression firm but calm. "No, I selected the vegetarian meal at booking. I confirmed it at check-in." Lila hesitated, her fingers pausing on the tablet. "I'm sorry, it's not in our system. We can try to accommodate, but no guarantees." "Try," Amara said, her voice cool as glass. "Or pretend to." Lila gave a quick nod and hurried off, leaving Amara with the same hollow echo that trailed every interaction on this flight. It wasn't about the food. It was about the erasure of what she'd earned, the quiet dismissal of her presence. She stared ahead, frustration simmering. She'd spent years mastering this, holding her ground without raising her voice. 5 minutes passed, then 10. She watched other passengers receive steaming plates with silverware and cloth napkins. Her tray stayed bare. Lila returned with a small plastic container, starkly different from the rest. "This is the best we could do," she said, setting it down before rushing off. No explanation, no apology, just silence. Again, Amara lifted the lid. A limp salad lettuce, a single tomato slice, a packet of dressing. No protein, no care. She stared at it, then closed the lid and pushed it aside. A deeper part of her whispered, "You've eaten worse while building empires." But even that voice felt weary. Outside, the clouds thickened, the light dimming as if mirroring her patience. A ding sounded overhead. The captain's voice came through. "Folks, we're expecting some turbulence ahead. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." Amara complied, securing her belt, her hands resting calmly on her thighs. Around her, passengers exchanged glances, largely unbothered. The engine's hum grew louder, the plane jostling gently. Then, a sharper jolt rocked the cabin, startling gasps from a few seats. A coffee cup tipped over, splashing the floor. Oxygen masks dropped from the overhead compartments with a hiss a standard precaution, but it sliced through the cabin's calm. Amara reached for her mask, securing it with steady hands. She'd done this before emergency drills, private flights. But what happened next caught her off guard. Evan rushed in from the galley, scanning rows. He stopped at row 1, helping an older man with trembling hands. He moved to row 4, adjusting a woman's mask straps, then to a couple in 5D and 5E. He skipped row 3 and entirely skipped Amara. She watched him pass without a glance, assisting the passenger beside her, who'd taken the seat after the earlier shuffle. Evan stood inches away, yet never acknowledged her. Her mask was on, her breathing even, but the omission roared louder than any alarm. As the turbulence eased and the plane steadied, the seatbelt sign chimed off. Passengers laughed nervously, settling back into routine. Amara removed her mask slowly, folding it with care. She scanned the cabin. No one seemed to notice what had happened, or they chose not to care. She caught Lila's eyes for a moment. The young attendant looked away instantly. Amara pressed a call button. It glowed blue. A moment later, Lila appeared, her smile forced. "Yes, ma'am. I'd like to speak to the lead attendant," Amara said. "Evan." Lila's voice faltered. "Evan?" "Yes, him." Lila vanished down the aisle. After a pause, Evan approached, his face already braced with defensiveness. "Is there a problem?" he asked, skipping pleasantries. Amara met his gaze. "Just wondering why I was the only one skipped during the oxygen mask assistance." Evan didn't blink. "Your mask was on. You seem fine. That didn't stop you from helping others who were covered," she said. He shrugged. "I was moving fast, prioritizing need. So people like me don't qualify as needing help?" Her voice was cool, cutting. Evan's mouth opened, but no words came. Then, "I was doing my job." "No," Amara said. "You were doing your version of it." She didn't raise her voice, didn't argue further. But the silence that followed was heavier than any turbulence. She leaned back, her eyes drifting to the window. Outside, a shaft of light broke through clouds. The storm had passed, but another was brewing. The sky settled into a pale blue, signaling calm. But inside the cabin, the air grew thick with unease not from turbulence, but from the weight of what had transpired. Amara sat still, her thoughts swirling like crosswinds. She was done expecting fairness from those who only performed it when it suited them. She cataloged every slight, every skip courtesy, every policy-wrapped jab. Yet nothing prepared her for what came next. About 20 minutes after the turbulence, a new figure appeared at the front of the cabin, a man in a tailored vest, name tag reading Marcus, Guest Relations Lead. His expression was polished diplomacy. He paused, whispered to Evan, then turned to Amara. "Ms. Ellis," he said, his voice smooth as velvet. "Do you have a moment to step to the forward lounge? We need to clarify a minor detail about your passenger profile." She raised an eyebrow. "Clarify?" "Nothing urgent," he added quickly. "Just a technicality we'd like to resolve in person." The words were rehearsed, the intent clear. They wanted her out of sight. Amara didn't argue. She closed her laptop, slipped it into her bag, and stood, locking eyes with Marcus. "Lead the way." As she passed the other passengers, their stares weren't curious, they were relieved, as if the issue was being handled. No one asked questions. They were just glad the anomaly was being removed. Marcus guided her through a curtain to a small crew area near the galley, then into a narrow room smelling of lemon wipes and recycled air. A woman sat at a foldable desk, her tablet glowing. Her name tag read Operations. She gestured for Amara to sit. "We had a passenger raise concerns about identity verification," she said, without preamble. "Normally, we'd handle this digitally, but given the in-flight setting, we need to reconfirm a few details." "Which passenger?" Amara asked. "That's confidential," the woman replied. "But to ensure smooth service, we're requesting a quick revalidation of your booking and a behavioral compliance acknowledgement." Amara's eyes narrowed. "Behavioral compliance?" The woman tapped her screen, turning it slightly. "It's a standard protocol, an agreement outlining cooperative conduct expected in premium classes. Part of our updated courtesy policy after mid-flight disturbances." "I haven't caused any disturbances," Amara said, her voice low but unyielding. "I've followed every rule, kept to myself, and spoken to your staff with nothing but respect." "Yes, ma'am, and that's noted," the woman said. "This is just to ensure we're aligned moving forward." Amara stared at the screen. At the bottom was a space for her e-signature, her name pre-filled. "Has this form been shown to anyone else on this flight?" "It's used as needed," the woman said, "when passengers feel uncertain." "Uncertain about what my right to be here?" "Ma'am," Marcus cut in, his tone gentle but firm, "we're not accusing you. We're responding to feedback to make everyone comfortable." Amara's lips twitched not a smile, but disbelief. She didn't yell. She didn't threaten. She asked, "And if I don't sign?" The woman's tone turned bureaucratic. "Then we need to relocate you to alternative seating until we verify All details. You mean demote me to economy? Amara said flatly. It's not a demotion, Ms. Ellis. Marcus said. It's a reassignment for passenger comfort. That phrase passenger comfort the soft mask for bias when systems ran out of excuses. Amara picked up the tablet, her eyes scanning the document. It was cloaked in neutrality, but drenched in assumption. She paused, then looked up. Do I get a copy of this? It'll be emailed upon completion, the woman said automatically. Amara pressed the stylus to the screen. For a moment, it seemed she'd sign. Instead, she wrote one word in elegant cursive, declined. She handed it back. If you're going to move me, do it. But let the record show I won't endorse your prejudice. Marcus shifted, visibly uneasy. The woman tapped her screen. I'll need to escalate this. You do that, Amara said, standing, adjusting her sweater. I'll be waiting to see how high your ladder goes. Outside the curtain, Lila stood waiting, eyes wide, sensing trouble. Amara said nothing, walking back to her seat. Halfway there, Marcus caught up. Ms. Ellis, he said quietly. We'll let you return to your seat for now, but we expect cooperation if further issues arise. Define issues, she shot back. He didn't answer, stepping aside. As she sat in 3A, passengers shifted awkwardly. The man in 4C coughed into his fist. The woman from earlier buried herself in her phone. Amara buckled her seatbelt slowly, leaning against a window. She no longer felt the cold glass, just a sharp certainty that every slight was building towards something bigger. They thought they were isolating her. In truth, they were setting her stage. The tension didn't fade after her, reshaped into a deeper unease. Amara sat motionless, her jawline catching the window's faint glow. She was aware of every breath, every glance, every subtle shift around her, cataloging them with precision of someone who turned pain into strategy. She hadn't signed their form. She hadn't bowed to pressure. But she knew resistance alone wasn't enough. It needed consequence. So, with steady fingers, she reached for her phone, opened a secure app encrypted, direct, reserved for moments that demanded no missteps. Her thumb hovered, then typed, Initiate Tier 5 Audit, Apex Clause, Horizon Holdings Freeze, Q3 Tranche. She hit send. The message vanished into a server linked to Solace Ventures' Financial Oversight Division, a fund she didn't just lead, but had built from nothing. It wasn't just money. It was leverage. The clause she triggered would halt $1 billion of Horizon Airways' $4.2 billion recovery investment, tied to diversity and passenger treatment benchmarks. Failure to comply would freeze funds and spark federal scrutiny. Notifications were already pinging inboxes. Legal teams were stirring. Phones would ring. No alarm sounded on the plane, but the ripple had begun, and all she had to do was wait. A few rows back, a young woman in her 20s scrolled her tablet, then froze. She leaned toward her seatmate. That's her, she whispered. Amara Ellis, Solace Ventures. She's behind the National Rail Fund, the Green Energy Bonds, the Healthcare Access Initiative. She was on Time's impact list last year. Her seatmate frowned. You sure? The woman nodded. I saw her speak at Davos. She walked out in sneakers, talked about justice like it was currency. A beat passed, and Horizon did this to her. The murmurs started, soft but spreading. Passengers who'd buried themselves in screens now looked up. No announcements, no headlines, just a shift in the air. Lila passed Amara's row, pausing briefly. Her expression was tight, uncertain. Would you like anything, Miss Ellis? Amara didn't look up from her phone. Sparkling water. No lemon. Lila nodded, her steps quicker now. Another passenger discreetly searched Amara Ellis Solace Ventures. Results flooded in profiles, TED Talks, editorials calling her a silent force of change. Word spread, quiet but unstoppable. Evan approached, his posture stiff but straining for grace. We've had an error with your meal record, he said. We'd like to offer a fresh option, prepared now. Amara tilted her head. You mean the meal that didn't exist before now does? We apologize for confusion, Evan said. It's being corrected. Let me guess, she said. This correction came after you realized who I am? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. She waved a hand. I'm fine. No need. He lingered, then nodded and left. The silence confirmed what others were beginning to grasp. This wasn't about seats or salads. It was about realization and reckoning. Somewhere below, in Horizon Chicago headquarters, an email hit the chief risk officer's inbox. Urgent. Funding clause triggered by VIP. The CFO was already dialing the CEO. We've got a $4.2 billion problem, he said. Back on the plane, Amara opened her camera app not to record, but to check her reflection. Her expression was unchanged, but her posture had shifted. She didn't look like someone enduring a flight. She looked like someone commanding a story. Lila returned with the water, pouring it carefully into a crystal glass. If you need anything, she whispered, let me know directly. Amara nodded, her tone soft but clear. Thank you, Lila. I will. The use of her name made Lila's eyes flicker with surprise, as if realizing Amara had seen her, remembered her, despite everything. Respect given freely was always sharper than scorn. The murmurs grew into ripples. Passengers leaned toward each other, not gossiping, but awakening. The woman they treated as a mistake was a mirror, a reminder, a force, and she was only beginning. By the time the plane reached cruising altitude again, the calm was deceptive. Passengers resumed their routines, flipping pages, adjusting earbuds, sipping drinks, but a shift had solidified. What began as whispers of recognition was now a rising tide. Amara Ellis's name had crossed from anonymity to revelation, and 30,000 feet below, the effects were landing. In Horizon's headquarters, CFO Daniel Carter stood over his assistant's desk, staring at a tablet in disbelief. The message had arrived via a secure compliance server. Flag read a priority unseen since the 2021 financial crisis. Immediate freeze notification. Solace Ventures Q3 tranche. The text was surgical. Effective immediately, Solace Ventures is suspending $1 billion of the $4.2 billion agreement due to noncompliance with DI benchmarks, including documented discriminatory incidents involving senior stakeholders. Freeze remains pending full audit and response. Daniel read it twice, then barked, "Get me the CO, now." In the air, the seatbelt sign flickered on not for turbulence, but descent prep. Amara's gaze shifted from the window to its reflection, catching the aisle's quiet drama. She didn't need to turn to know most passengers knew her name. Her phone buzzed a message from her general counsel. Freeze in place. Legal brief filed. Media coverage expected by end of day. Stand by. She slid the phone into her pocket, her hands folding in her lap. Power didn't fascinate her like it did others. For Amara, it was about accountability. And for the first time since boarding, she felt the balance tip fully into her hands. Evan approached again, his demeanor softened, almost reverent. "Ms. Ellis," he said cautiously, "the captain would like a word. He's unaware of what's happened and wants to offer an apology." Amara met his eyes, her voice calm but piercing. "Tell your captain to focus on flying. I've had enough turbulence already." Evan hesitated, nodded, and retreated. In 4C, the man who'd requested a seat change sat rigid, scrolling his phone with unease. He glanced at Amara once, then quickly away. Lila passed through, offering refills with nervous care. She paused by Amara, setting down a fresh San Pellegrino. "Compliments of the crew," she said softly. Amara looked at the bottle but didn't take it. "You don't have to fix what you didn't break," she said. Lila lingered, then nodded. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry." Amara gave a faint nod. Noted. At Horizon's headquarters, CEO Laura Bennett stormed into the crisis room as legal and PR teams scrambled. "How did this happen?" she demanded. Daniel stepped forward. "We targeted one of our lead investors mid-flight, without knowing it was her." Laura's face paled. "A board member?" "Worse," Daniel said. "The founder of Solace Ventures, the architect of our post-crisis financing." Silence gripped the room. "She froze $1 billion, Daniel added. "We'll be lucky if this isn't viral by landing." Legal counsel spoke up. "We need a preemptive statement, not an admission, just a signal we're acting." "She won't go public first," Daniel said. She doesn't need to. The clause is active. Oversight agencies are already alerted. Laura sank into a chair, staring at the wall. We cut our own throats. In the air, Amara opened her laptop not to work, but to let us unfill the void where exhaustion crept in. She wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't tired. She was resolved. The moment they'd underestimated her, they'd made a choice. Now their funding, their control, their illusions were unraveling not with a scream, but in silence. The reversal was done. They just hadn't grasped its scale. The captain announced descent. Welcome to Seattle-Tacoma International. Please remain seated until we reach the gate. Amara closed her laptop, stowing it carefully. As the engine slowed and the nose dipped, a slow breath left her lungs. This wasn't just a landing. It was a fall. The plane touched down smoothly, gliding to the gate. The cabin stirred with the usual clatter, seatbelts unbuckling, phones powering on, bags retrieved. But no one crowded near Amara. The aisle around her cleared, an unspoken buffer of caution and consequence. As the doors opened, the first-class crew positioned for departure. Evan, clipboard in hand, avoided her gaze. Lila offered a slight nod, as if saying, I see it now. I wish I'd seen it sooner. Amara returned the nod, polite but restrained, and stepped forward. At the jet bridge's end, two sharply dressed figures waited, both in black suits, wearing lapel pins with Solace Ventures logo. One extended a tablet. Ms. Ellis, confirmation of Tier 5 protocol receipt, he said. Press here to finalize transmission. Amara signed swiftly and handed it back. Are we live with DC and London? As of 5 minutes ago, he replied. Your message to Treasury and Solace trustees is circulating. Good, she said, her stride unwavering. At baggage claim, a black limousine waited, its door open. On the panel, in silver, read, Solace Ventures, investing $4.2 billion for equity. A small crowd media. Executives gathered beyond the gate. Word had traveled fast. A handler turned to Amara. Ms. Bennett from Horizon requests an urgent meeting. She's offering to fly to Seattle tonight. Amara didn't break stride. Let her wait. I have priorities. She entered the car, the door closing with a soft thud, sealing out the noise but locking in the shift. Power had never been louder in its quiet. At gate D12, the crew gathered in the ops room, visibly shaken. Evan, unusually silent, sat with arms folded. A supervisor entered, her face pale, holding a report highlighted in red. You're here because of a Category A compliance failure on Flight 814, she began. The passenger, Amara Ellis, isn't just a premium client. She's a founder of Solace Ventures, our primary investor, behind a $4.2 billion recovery agreement. She's filed a Tier 5 breach. Audits are coming. Press inquiries are coming. If we don't handle this transparently, firings will follow. Evan raised a hand, voice low. Is she suing? She doesn't need to, the supervisor said. She froze $1 billion. That's the lawsuit. Lila stared at the table, her earlier apology feeling small. Outside, the limousine glided away. Inside, Amara looked ahead, her phone face down. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't gloating. She was doing what she always did, holding people accountable, without raising her voice. The storm they'd sown was theirs to face, and she was above it. By sunset, the fallout had begun. What happened at 30,000 feet wasn't confined to the clouds. It landed in boardrooms, inboxes, newsrooms, government offices. Horizon Airways, once a beacon of post-crisis recovery, trended globally for all the wrong reasons. Within hours of landing, an email from Horizon's HR hit Evan Carter's inbox. Employment termination. Clause 2.1 violation. The text was unflinching. Your repeated discriminatory conduct toward a Tier 1 passenger breaches respectful conduct standards. Your employment is terminated effective immediately. Evan sat in his apartment, rereading it, his hands trembling not from shock, but from the clarity that his sense of authority was fragile, disposable. He hadn't just mishandled a passenger. He'd crossed a woman who wrote the rules Horizon claimed to follow. Lila spared immediate firing. receive a written warning and a mandatory bias retraining program. Her manager, who'd praised her days before, called with a different tone. "Expect a full review at the next audit," he said. "The board's watching everyone." But the consequences didn't stop at the crew. They climbed Horizon C-suite. By noon, CEO Laura Bennett sat before a Senate panel in a televised oversight hearing. The banner read, "Horizon CEO faces discrimination scandal for $0.2 billion at risk." Senator Maria Delgado leaned forward. "Your airline took $4.2 billion for equitable recovery, yet your team humiliated the woman who made that possible. How do you justify this?" Laura's jaw tightened. "Senator, the crew didn't know Ms. Ellis's identity. So if she wasn't an investor, would her treatment be acceptable?" Delgado pressed. "No," Laura stammered. "It was a failure of training, of culture." "Culture starts at the top," Delgado cut in. Cameras flashed. Every airline exec watching knew this was a reckoning. Meanwhile, Solace Ventures issued a statement. Due to documented DI violations, Solace has withdrawn Q3 funding from Horizon Airways, redirecting the tranche to Ascent Air, a carrier committed to justice-based operations. The news hit like thunder. Ascent Air, a smaller rival, surged with a $1 billion infusion, no longer just competitor, but rising star. Horizon's internal Slack channels erupted in panic. Are we losing Solace entirely? Is the merger dead? How did no one know who she was? But they had known enough to act better. They'd chosen not to. In a Seattle conference room, Amara sat with Ascent Air's executives, the space bright with blue glass and quiet ambition. She wasn't here to gloat. She was here to rebuild. "I don't want revenge," she said. "I want systems that reward integrity over harm." Ascent CEO, a young Korean-American woman named Sujin Park, nodded. "You'll have a board seat and a public voice in every DI initiative we launch." Amara glanced at the screen behind her, displaying Solace Ascent's strategic equity plan. $4.2 billion commitment. "And I want transparency," she added. "Not just inside, but out. People don't need brands, they need proof." That evening, the news broke. Solace severs Horizon ties, backs ethical rival. Hashtags flooded social media. Hashtag justice at 30,000 feet. Hashtag Amara Ellis. Hashtag power unleashed. Public sentiment swung hard. Law students analyzed the case. Activists sent support. Airline stocks wavered. For once, corporate accountability wasn't just a buzzword, it was Amara's truth, embodied in her quiet stand. A year later, Flight 814's shadow lingered in an industry forced to evolve. The scandal had become a case study, and Amara, its heart, had grown beyond financier or founder. She was a catalyst, her name now spoken in rooms that once overlooked her. On a crisp morning in Washington, D.C., the Global Aviation Ethics Summit convened. Executives, regulators, and advocates filled the hall, their energy tinged with sincerity absent in years past. Amara took the stage, dressed in a navy blazer and cream silk blouse. No fanfare, no spotlight, just her, commanding a room that had learned her silence's cost. She didn't speak of vengeance or list failures. She spoke of renewal. "Flight 814 wasn't about me," she began, her voice steady, resonant. "It was about a system so used to exclusion, it couldn't see its own reflection. But what followed was about us all." She spoke of courage in small moments, of rewiring spaces to prevent harm. The applause was thunderous, not polite, but real. Afterward, in a quiet corridor, a woman approached mid-40s, in a simple black dress, her badge bearing Horizon's logo. Her name was Elena, a junior attendant from that flight. She took a breath. "Ms. Ellis, you won't remember me. I was on 814. I stayed silent that day. I saw the looks, the choices, and told myself it wasn't my place." Her voice cracked. "But what you did showed me silence is a choice. I wrote this after flight, but couldn't send it." She handed Amara a folded note. Amara opened it. "I'm sorry I stayed quiet. Thank you for proving your truth without my voice." Elena continued. "I filed a complaint 6 months ago, joined Ascent's DI task force, and testified for bias protocols. Because of you, I stood up for a passenger last month. I said, "No," and I didn't whisper it. Amara smiled, not from pride, but purpose. "You're not silent now," she said. "That's what counts." They shared a nod, heartfelt, before parting. That evening, at a St. Ayres gala, the room glowed with ambition and humility, executives beside activists, pilots next to poets. The Horizon Fund was unveiled, $4.2 million quarterly for racial equity, passage of dignity, and bias education, not as PR, but as a permanent commitment. Amara, listed as patron and advisor, didn't pose for photos. Her presence spoke enough. A journalist asked off record why she stayed engaged after everything. She sipped her water and said, "You don't rebuild a broken bridge and walk away. You cross it daily to ensure no one else falls." As she left, she glanced back at the venue, not nostalgia, but a vow. The flight was over, but her journey moved forward, guided by truth. If this story stirred you, challenged you, or lit a spark, hit that subscribe button so you never miss what's next. Drop a comment what moment in Amara's journey hit you hardest. Where are you watching from? We're building community that values justice, resilience, and stories that dare to speak truth. Your voice belongs here.